Another specialist with promises. What makes you different?
Because I don't treat symptoms, Mr. Larson. I treat the truth you've been running from.
Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. The Manhattan penthouse that crowned the Larson Tower stood 68 floors above the city, but its owner had never felt lower. Eric Larson lay against Egyptian cotton sheets, his once powerful frame now a shadow of itself. Sunlight tried to penetrate the partially drawn curtains, creating strips of gold across the bedroom that never quite reached him. It had been this way for months now. Light existing in the same space, but never touching him. "Mr. Larson, you need to eat something, Mrs. Torres," his housekeeper of 15 years, placed a tray beside his bed. The concern in her eyes had deepened daily as she watched him waste away. Eric turned his face toward the window. At 36, he had built an empire spanning 3 continents, survived market crashes and corporate takeovers, but he couldn't survive this hollow feeling that had consumed him since that February afternoon 6 months ago. The image was burned into his memory, walking into the Hamptons beach house, hearing Sophia's laughter from upstairs, following it to find her naked in their bed, with Lucas, his best friend since college and the CFO of Larson Industries. "I'll eat later," he murmured, his voice raspy from disuse. "That's what you said yesterday and the day before." Mrs. Torres's usually deferential tone had given way to maternal authority. "The new specialist will be here soon." Eric closed his eyes. "Cancel it. They're all the same. Tests, prescriptions, referrals. Nothing works." His voice cracked on the last word, betraying the desperation he tried to hide. "This one is different, Mrs." Torres persisted, adjusting his pillows, despite his irritated sigh. "She helped my nephew Carlos when Johns Hopkins sent him home to die. Said his heart failure was too advanced. She had him dancing at his sister's wedding 3 months later." Eric studied Mrs. Torres's face. In 15 years, she had never pushed her opinions on him. Her uncharacteristic insistence signaled something beyond ordinary concern. "What is she? Some kind of miracle worker?" His tone was sarcastic, but exhaustion had dulled its edge. "She calls herself an integrative nurse specialist, combines traditional medicine with other approaches." Mrs. Torres straightened her spine. "I've already scheduled her. She'll be here in an hour." Before Eric could object further, his body betrayed him with a coughing spasm that left him gasping. The mysterious symptoms had started with fatigue, then progressed to muscle weakness, intermittent fevers, and stabbing chest pains. Every test showed nothing conclusive. His heart was structurally sound. Lungs, clear blood work, normal. The top diagnosticians in the country were baffled. Some suggested his symptoms were psychosomatic, a reaction to emotional trauma. Eric had fired them immediately. When the private elevator chimed an hour later, Eric had managed to sit up against the headboard, a black cashmere throw across his legs. His jawline, once sharp and commanding, was now obscured by a dark beard. He lacked the energy to shave. His Norwegian heritage gave him naturally broad shoulders and height, making his current frailty all the more striking. Mrs. Torres entered first. "Mr. Larson, this is Lena Marie." The woman who followed her was not what Eric expected. No older than 30, Lena Marie moved with a quiet confidence that immediately commanded attention. She wore simple navy slacks and a crisp white blouse, her natural hair framing a face with high cheekbones and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. She carried a leather medical bag that looked worn with use rather than age. "You can leave us, Mrs. Torres," Eric said, his gaze fixed on the newcomer. After the door closed, Lena approached without the cautious reverence most people showed in his presence. "Mr. Larson, I'm Lena Marie. Before we start, I should tell you I'm not a conventional practitioner." Her voice carried traces of a New Orleans accent, softened, but not erased by education. Eric found himself listening to its rhythm, despite his skepticism. "So I've been told you're my housekeeper's miracle worker." He gestured weakly toward a chair. "Let's get this over with." Lena set her bag down but didn't sit. "I don't perform miracles, Mr. Larson. I simply recognize that healing doesn't always follow conventional paths." She moved to the windows and drew the curtains fully open, flooding the room with afternoon light. Eric winced. "What are you doing?" "Creating an environment conducive to healing," she replied, unperturbed by his tone. "Your body can't heal in darkness." For the next 30 minutes, she conducted an examination unlike any Eric had experienced. Beyond checking his vitals, she asked questions no other doctor had about his dreams, his relationships before Sophia, his childhood in Norway, before his family moved to America. Her fingers pressed points on his wrists and neck with deliberate precision, her expression revealing nothing. Well, Eric finally asked, irritation masking his curiosity. What exotic disease have you discovered that the specialists missed? Lena packed her stethoscope away before meeting his eyes directly. There's nothing physically wrong with your organs or systems, Mr. Larson. Your body is manifesting what your heart and mind can't process. Eric's laugh was bitter. Another psychosomatic diagnosis. I fired doctors for suggesting less. It's not psychosomatic. It's somato-emotional. Lena's calm remained unshaken. Your betrayal activated a trauma response that's disrupting your body's natural healing systems. The symptoms are very real, just not from the causes you're looking for. Eric's jaw tightened. So I'm imagining my way into an early grave because my wife cheated. How convenient for my team of incompetent physicians. Your wife's betrayal was simply the trigger, not the cause. Lena's directness was unsettling. The root is deeper, older. Your body is sending messages your conscious mind refuses to hear. And what message would that be? Eric's voice was dangerously quiet. That's what we'd need to discover together. She began repacking her bag. But I can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. I appreciate Mrs. Torres's faith in me, but a sudden wave of dizziness interrupted Eric's planned dismissal. The room spun violently, his vision tunneling to pinpricks of light. He felt himself falling sideways, his weakened body unable to right itself. Instead of hitting the edge of the nightstand, he felt firm hands catching him, lowering him back against the pillows. Breathe with me, Lena's voice commanded close to his ear, her hand pressed against his chest, establishing a rhythm. In through your nose, 4 counts, hold for 7. Out through your mouth for 8. Again, Eric found himself following her instructions, the spinning gradually subsiding. When his vision cleared, Lena's face was inches from his, her eyes revealing concern without pity, a distinction few people managed in his presence. That wasn't psychosomatic, he whispered, his voice rough. No, she agreed quietly. That was your body screaming what your mind won't acknowledge. For a moment they remained frozen in that tableau, her hand on his chest, his eyes locked with hers. Something electric and unexpected passed between them, a connection that transcended their roles as patient and healer. I'll show myself out, Lena said, finally breaking the spell as she straightened. I wish you well, Mr. Larson. Wait. The word escaped before Eric could reconsider. How long would your treatment take? Lena paused by the door. That depends on you, but I would recommend an intensive approach. 2 weeks minimum. And what would that involve? Complete commitment to the process, no half measures. Her gaze was unflinching. I would need unrestricted access day and night. Your condition can spiral quickly, as you just experienced. Eric considered her words. 6 months of conventional medicine had left him worse than when he started. What did he have to lose? My security team is very strict about overnight guests, he said, attempting his old authoritative tone despite his weakened state. Then we'll need a cover story. Lena's practical tone belied the unconventional suggestion, something that gives me unrestricted access without raising questions. What did you have in mind? Eric asked, intrigued despite himself. The simplest explanation is usually best. Introduce me as your wife. Eric stared at her, certain he'd misheard. My wife? It's the perfect cover. No one questions a wife's constant presence or private conversations. Your staff would expect us to share accommodations. Lena's clinical detachment made the outrageous suggestion sound reasonable. It's a therapeutic fiction, nothing more. Eric should have dismissed her immediately. Instead, he found himself considering it. Beyond the practical aspects, something about her calm confidence made him want to trust her approach, unconventional as it was. 2 weeks, he said finally. I'll give you 2 weeks to prove your methods work. A hint of a smile touched Lena's lips. I should warn you, Mr. Larson, once we start, there's no going back. Healing isn't always comfortable. Neither is dying, he replied, extending his hand to seal their arrangement. When their fingers met, Eric felt an electric current shooting up his arm, the first genuine sensation to penetrate the numbness of the past 6 months. Lena's grip was firm, confident, her skin soft against his, the touch igniting something he'd thought permanently extinguished. Neither of them could have known in that moment how this clinical arrangement would transform them both, or that their therapeutic charade would awaken feelings more real and profound than anything either had experienced before. Chapter 2. Reluctant Intimacies. Lena returned to the Larson penthouse the following morning, a single suitcase in hand. Mrs. Torres greeted her with barely concealed relief, clearly grateful. Someone had finally convinced her stubborn employer to accept help. Mr. Larson explained your arrangement, the housekeeper said, her tone careful, but her eyes knowing. I've prepared the guest suite connected to the master bedroom. Thank you. Lena kept her expression neutral, recognizing the older woman's protective instinct toward Eric. Could you show me around the apartment? I need to understand the environment before making changes. The penthouse was a fortress of masculine minimalism, glass, steel, and dark wood, spanning nearly 6,000 square feet of prime Manhattan real estate. Despite its opulence, it felt curiously sterile, more museum than home. The only evidence of human habitation was in Eric's bedroom, where scattered books, abandoned water glasses, and rumpled bedding betrayed the space, where he'd essentially imprisoned himself since Sophia's betrayal. When Mrs. Torres left to prepare lunch, Lena stood in the center of the master bedroom, taking inventory. Heavy blackout curtains blocked most natural light. The air felt stagnant. On the nightstand, an array of prescription bottles stood like silent sentinels: sleeping pills, anxiety, medication, painkillers. Planning to redecorate, Eric's voice came from the doorway to the ensuite bathroom. He wore navy silk pajamas that hung loose on his diminished frame, his hair damp from a shower that had clearly drained his limited energy. In a manner of speaking, Lena crossed to the windows and pulled the curtains open, ignoring his wince at the sudden brightness. Light and air are essential healing elements. Eric lowered himself carefully into an armchair. My staff has been briefed on our situation, though I'm sure Mrs. Torres has her suspicions. People believe what makes sense to them. Lena opened her suitcase, removing several small bottles and bundles of dried herbs. If a man in your position suddenly has a wife, they'll assume it was a private ceremony or a whirlwind romance. And what exactly is a man in my position? There was a challenge in his voice. Lena glanced up from arranging her supplies. Powerful, wealthy, accustomed to controlling his environment, she held his gaze. Until recently, a muscle twitched in Eric's jaw, but he didn't argue. Progress, Lena thought. I need to establish a baseline, she said, approaching him with a small notebook. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your physical pain right now? 6, he answered, after a moment's consideration. And your emotional state? Same scale. Eric's expression hardened. I didn't agree to therapy. You agreed to healing, Lena countered. Mind and body aren't separate systems. Now 1 to 10. Their eyes locked in silent battle before Eric finally muttered, 8. Lena made notes without comment, then placed her fingers against his wrist, counting his pulse. Her touch was professional, but still sent an unexpected warmth through Eric's arm. Your first treatment begins now, she said, releasing his wrist. A cleansing of your environment. I'll need to modify this space, introduce elements that promote healing energy. Healing energy, Eric echoed skeptically. What does that entail? Crystal balls and chanting. Lena's expression remained serene despite his mockery. Actually, it means fresh air, natural light, living plants, and removing stagnant energy. She gestured to the untouched side of the king-sized bed, including the empty space that reminds you of absence every night. Eric's flinch told her she'd struck a nerve. Good. Wounds needed to be exposed before they could heal. By evening, the master suite had been transformed. The heavy drapes were replaced with gauzy white curtains that filtered light without blocking it. Potted plants brought life to empty corners. The bedding was changed from dark gray to pale blue. Most significantly, the king bed had been exchanged for a queen, eliminating the empty space Eric had been sleeping beside. Lena had also unpacked a small sound system, now playing soft instrumental music with subtle rhythms that mimicked heartbeats. The scent of lavender and cedar wafted from a small diffuser. Eric observed these changes with begrudging curiosity upon returning from a painful but necessary walk down the hallway. Lena's insistence on movement overriding his preference for bed rest. It doesn't look like my room anymore, he commented, lowering himself onto the edge of the new bed. That's intentional. Lena handed him a steaming mug. Mint tea with honey and ginger. It will help with inflammation. Eric sipped cautiously. You've essentially erased her. Not erased, released. Lena sat in a chair opposite him. Tell me about when you first felt ill. Eric stared into his mug. A week after I found them together, I thought it was just stress at first, trouble sleeping, no appetite. Then came the chest pains. Doctors thought it was cardiac, but tests showed nothing. And what happened with Sophia after you discovered them? His knuckles whitened around the mug. She said she never loved me, that she married me for my money and position, that Lucas at least made her feel something. His voice turned bitter. They'd been laughing at me for months, stealing company information while sharing my bed. That must have been devastating. Lena's tone held genuine empathy, without pity. I threw them both out, filed for divorce, fired Lucas. Eric's voice was mechanical, reciting facts without accessing the emotions beneath. I handled it. Did you? Lena's question hung in the air between them. Your body suggests otherwise. Eric's expression closed like a vault. I'm tired. I think we're done for today. Lena knew better than to push further. We'll continue tomorrow. Try to sleep in the new bedding tonight. Your body needs to associate this space with rest, not trauma. That night, Eric lay in the unfamiliar bed, surrounded by unfamiliar scents and shadows. Something about the room's transformation had disturbed him more deeply than he expected. It wasn't just Sophia's ghost that Lena had banished, but the comfort of his familiar pain, the suffering he'd grown accustomed to. The nightmare struck just after midnight. In his dream, Eric was back in the Hamptons' house, climbing the stairs to the bedroom. But this time the staircase stretched endlessly upward, Sophia's laughter growing louder yet never reaching its source. He called her name. His legs leaden, his chest constricting until he couldn't breathe. Eric. A voice cut through the darkness and cool hands framed his face. It's a nightmare. You're safe. Breathe with me. He gasped awake to find Lena sitting on the edge of his bed, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a bedside lamp. She wore simple cotton pajamas, her hair loose around her shoulders, concern evident in her eyes. Focus on my voice, she instructed, maintaining eye contact. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8. Eric struggled to follow her rhythm, his heart still racing from the nightmare. Gradually, his breathing steadied. Only then did he become aware of how close she was, her hands still cradling his face, her scent, something like vanilla and cloves, filling his senses. How did you know? He asked hoarsely. You cried out. Lena's hands slowly lowered from his face, but she didn't move away. Do you remember what you were dreaming? Eric looked away. The same thing that plays on repeat every night, finding them together. Tell me what hurt the most in that moment, Lena said quietly. Not what you think should have hurt, what actually cut deepest. The question bypassed his defenses, reaching straight to the truth he'd been avoiding. That I wasn't enough, he whispered, the admission torn from somewhere deep inside him. Why wasn't I enough? Instead of offering platitudes, Lena shared her own truth. My fiancé left 3 years ago, said my work was more important to me than he was. Her voice held no self-pity, just understanding. Some people can't recognize worth when they hold it. In the dim light, with sleep still clouding his defenses, Eric saw not just a healthcare provider, but a woman with her own scars and strengths. Their eyes held for a moment too long, an unspoken current passing between them. You should try to sleep, Lena said finally, moving to stand. Eric's hand caught hers before he could question the impulse. Thank you, he said, simply, his voice roughened with emotion. Their fingers remained linked for a heartbeat longer than necessary, the connection between them vibrating with unspoken possibilities. When Lena finally withdrew to her adjoining room, Eric lay awake, the ghost of her touch burning on his skin. For the first time in months, it wasn't pain or betrayal that kept him awake, but the exhilarating awareness of something new stirring within him, a hunger for life he'd thought permanently extinguished. Chapter 3. Santorini Surrender. Are you sure about this? Lena stood in Eric's home office, watching as he spoke on the phone with his pilot. 3 days had passed since their nighttime encounter, and Eric had made remarkable progress, his color improving, appetite, returning able to walk the length of the penthouse without rest. Eric ended the call and turned to her. The jet will be ready in 3 hours unless you've changed your mind. His suggestion the previous evening had caught her off guard, continuing her treatment at his villa in Santorini. A complete change of environment, he'd argued. Isn't that part of your healing protocol? It was, but Lena hadn't expected him to suggest something so intimate, a private island halfway around the world, just the two of them. The professional boundaries she strived to maintain already felt increasingly fragile. I haven't changed my mind, she replied, keeping her tone measured. But I need to be clear about boundaries before we go. Our arrangement remains therapeutic. Something flickered in Eric's eyes. Amusement challenge. Of course you're still my healer. I'm still your patient. Yet the way he studied her face suggested he was as aware as she was of the current shifting between them. The journey to Santorini passed in comfortable conversation aboard Eric's private jet. Lena was struck by the changes in him already. He'd shaved his beard, revealing the sharp jawline that had graced magazine covers. His designer clothes, previously hanging loose, now fit his frame better as his appetite returned. Most notably, his eyes had regained focus and intensity, particularly when they rested on her. They landed as twilight painted the Aegean in shades of orange and violet. A private car delivered them along winding cliffside roads to Eric's villa perched on Santorini's highest point, with uninterrupted views of the caldera. "It's breathtaking," Lena whispered as they stepped onto the main terrace. The whitewashed structure cascaded down the volcanic cliff in tiers of private balconies and infinity pools, the iconic blue domes capturing the last golden rays of sunlight. "I bought it 5 years ago, but rarely visit," Eric said, standing close enough that she felt his warmth in the cooling evening air. "Business always called me elsewhere." A small staff greeted them in the courtyard, the villa manager addressing Lena as Mrs. Larson without hesitation. Eric made no move to correct him, instead placing his hand lightly on the small of her back in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. The manager led them to the master suite, a sprawling space dominated by a circular bed facing floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the sea. The bathroom featured an enormous shower carved into volcanic rock and a soaking tub positioned before another panoramic window. "Will this be acceptable for the lady?" the manager asked Eric in accented English. Before Eric could respond, Lena interjected, "It's lovely, but I'll need the connected guest room prepared as well for my treatment equipment." The manager's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Of course, madam. It will be ready within the hour." After he left, an awkward silence fell between them. Eric broke it first. "You don't need to stay in the guest room on my account. The bed is more than large enough." "That's not appropriate." Lena cut in perhaps too quickly. "I meant what I said about boundaries." Eric's smile held a challenge. Even fake wives need to maintain professional standards, especially fake ones. She turned toward the terrace, needing distance from his magnetic presence. "I'll sleep in the guest room. It's non-negotiable." Later that evening, after a quiet dinner on the terrace prepared by the villa's chef, Lena found Eric standing at the balcony rail gazing at the moonlit sea. The staff had retired to their quarters on the lower level, leaving them truly alone. She hesitated, then joined him at the rail, maintaining careful distance. "Haven't tried yet," he glanced at her, noting she'd changed into loose cotton pants and a simple tank top. The moon on the water, it seemed a shame to miss it. The silver path cast across the dark sea was indeed mesmerizing. They stood in companionable silence until Eric spoke again, his voice lower, more vulnerable than she'd heard before. "I never brought Sophia here," he said unexpectedly. "I always meant to, but there was always another meeting, another deal." His knuckles whitened on the rail. "Maybe if I had prioritized differently." "We can't know that," Lena said gently. "Some people aren't capable of recognizing value, no matter how it's presented." Eric turned to face her fully. "Is that what happened with your fiancé?" Lena hesitated, unaccustomed to sharing her own pain. Yet something about the night, this place, and the man beside her so different from the broken patient she'd first met invited honesty. "Nathan was a surgeon. We met during my clinical rotation." Her fingers traced patterns on the cool stone rail. "He loved the idea of me, the dedicated nurse with unconventional healing knowledge, until it became clear I wouldn't abandon my grandmother's teachings to fit into his world of purely evidence-based medicine." "What happened?" Eric asked, genuinely interested. "I was offered a chance to study traditional healing methods in New Orleans, with practitioners who knew my grandmother. He gave me an ultimatum, the fellowship or him." Lena's smile held no regret. "I chose my path." "Do you ever wonder if you made the wrong choice?" "No," she answered without hesitation. "Compromising yourself for someone else's comfort isn't love. It's surrender of the wrong kind." The sea breeze shifted, carrying her scent to him, something natural and spiced that had become familiar. Eric found himself moving closer, drawn by forces he wasn't trying to resist anymore. "And what would be the right kind of surrender?" His voice had dropped to a near whisper. Lena's eyes met his unwavering, despite the electricity crackling between them. "The kind where both people become more themselves, not less." Dawn was breaking over the Aegean when Eric woke the next morning. For the first time in months, he'd slept deeply without nightmares or pain. He dressed in swim shorts and made his way down to the infinity pool carved into the cliff face, surprised to find Lena already there. She was floating on her back, eyes closed the water, lapping gently around her form. The simple black swimsuit revealed curves her professional attire had only hinted at her skin, glowing copper in the early light. Eric's breath caught at the vision. She presented serene yet somehow elemental, as though she belonged to this landscape of sea and stone. Sensing his presence, she straightened in the water. "Good morning. You slept well. Better than I have in months," he admitted, stepping into the cool water. "No dreams at all." "That's progress." She moved closer, professional mode, engaging. "Today we're adding water therapy to your treatment. The buoyancy will help rebuild your muscle strength without strain." For the next hour, she guided him through exercises in the water, her hands supporting his back, adjusting his position. Each touch, though clinical in intent, sent awareness rippling through him. By the time they finished, Eric felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. "You're recovering faster than I expected," Lena observed as they sat on the pool's edge, legs still dangling in the water. "I have excellent motivation." His eyes held hers, making it clear she was part of that motivation. Lena looked away first. "I should check your pulse rate after exertion." Her fingers found his wrist, counting silently. Eric watched her face, the slight furrow of concentration between her brows, droplets of water clinging to her eyelashes. Lips slightly parted as she counted. "Elevated," she murmured. "Is that your professional assessment?" Eric's voice was husky. "Because I could have told you that." Her eyes flickered up to his, and the pretense of clinical detachment evaporated between them. Eric's hand covered hers where it still rested on his wrist, their fingers intertwining with unspoken intent. "Eric," she whispered, warning and invitation mingled in his name. "Tell me to stop," he said, leaning closer, giving her every chance to pull away. Instead, Lena remained perfectly still, her eyes never leaving his as the space between them disappeared. When their lips finally met, the contact sparked like flint against steel, a first exploration charged with months of denied attraction. Eric's hand rose to cup her cheek, still cool and damp from the water. His thumb, tracing the delicate line of what began as gentle inquiry, exploded into ardor as months of Eric's emotional numbness shattered under her touch. He deepened the kiss, drawing a soft gasp from her that incinerated the last of his restraint. His arms encircled her, pulling her against him as the kiss transformed into something primal and urgent, their bodies recognizing what their minds had been denying. Lena responded with equal fervor, her hands threading through his hair body, arching toward his with an honesty that transcended words. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the professional boundary she'd insisted upon had entirely evaporated. "We shouldn't," she whispered, her hands still resting on his chest. "Why not?" Eric's forehead pressed against hers, unwilling to create more distance between them. "What's happening between us is real, Lena. More real than anything I've felt in years." She closed her eyes, conflicted. "You're vulnerable in recovery." "I'm not," he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "I've been dead inside for months. Don't ask me to stop feeling alive again." His words struck a chord that resonated through her own carefully constructed walls. Perhaps her insistence on professional distance wasn't just about ethics, but fear. Fear of opening herself to the intensity she sensed in him, in what was growing between them. When Eric kissed her again, more gently this time, Lena made her choice. Her arms wound around his neck as she surrendered not to him but to the current that had been pulling them together since that first electric touch in his Manhattan bedroom. As the Santorini sun rose higher, casting their entwined shadows across the white stone terrace, neither spoke of boundaries or arrangements. Those belonged to another world, another time, before this island, before this moment of surrender that would change everything between them. Chapter 4. Venetian Fever. The week in Santorini passed in a sensual blur of sun-drenched days and star-filled nights. By day, they maintained a semblance of their therapeutic relationship, Lena guiding Eric through strengthening exercises, monitoring his improving health, preparing herbal remedies from local ingredients. But as each sunset painted the whitewashed walls in shades of gold, pretense fell away. Their evenings were spent exploring each other with increasing boldness, first on the terrace under stars, then in the circular bed that had initially caused such awkward tension. Lena's treatment room went unused, her professional boundaries surrendering to the undeniable chemistry between them. On their 7th night, as they lay, tangled in sheets still damp from lovemaking, Eric traced lazy patterns on the curve of Lena's hip. "I'm thinking of Venice next," he murmured against her shoulder. Lena turned to face him moonlight, sculpting his features into sharp relief. His transformation amazed her. The hollow-eyed patient from Manhattan, now replaced by a vital, powerful man whose body showed no trace of the mysterious illness that had plagued him. "More treatment locations?" she asked with a teasing smile. "Or are we just on vacation now?" Eric's expression grew serious. "Neither. I'm not your patient anymore, Lena. And you're not my nurse." His fingers intertwined with hers. What's happening between us transcended that days ago. The truth of his words hung between them. What had begun as a clinical arrangement had evolved into something neither had anticipated, something that made professional ethics seem irrelevant against the reality of their connection. Venice, then. Lena agreed, pushing aside the small voice that warned this fantasy couldn't last forever. Reality would eventually intrude, but not tonight. Tonight belonged to them alone. The Larson family palazzo on Venice's Grand Canal dated back to the 16th century, its facade a masterpiece of Gothic architecture, rising 3 stories from the water. Inside, modern luxury blended seamlessly with historical elements, original frescoed ceilings soaring above contemporary furnishings, ancient marble floors warmed by state-of-the-art heating. Their arrival just before sunset cast the antique mirrored hallways in a golden glow as the palazzo's caretaker, an elegant older Italian woman named Isabella, showed them to the master suite. "All has been prepared as requested, Signor Larson," she said, opening doors to reveal a sprawling bedroom with silk-draped windows overlooking the canal. "Will the Signora require anything special?" Eric's hand settled possessively at Lena's waist. She enjoys fresh flowers, particularly orchids. The casual intimacy of him knowing her preferences learned during their Santorini idyll sent warmth spiraling through Lena. This was no longer pretense. The way Eric looked at her was genuine feeling that both thrilled and terrified her. After Isabella departed, Eric pulled Lena to the window. Below, gondolas glided past in the fading light, their lanterns beginning to illuminate the twilight. "I've arranged something special for tonight," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We'll need to dress for dinner." Hours later, Lena found herself floating down the Grand Canal in a private gondola. Venice's historic palazzos gliding past like a dream sequence. She wore a midnight blue dress Eric had waiting for her, silk that draped her curves like water, highlighting the warm bronze of her skin against the deep color. Eric, resplendent in a perfectly tailored black suit, watched her with undisguised appreciation as she trailed her fingers through the water. Gone was the bitter, broken man she'd first met. In his place sat someone rediscovering joy, his eyes missing nothing, especially where she was concerned. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked as their gondolier steered them down a smaller, less trafficked canal. Eric's smile held secrets. "Somewhere more private." The gondolier, an older man with the weathered face of someone who had spent decades on these waters, navigated with practiced ease through increasingly narrow waterways. Eventually, they emerged into a small, secluded lagoon surrounded by abandoned palazzos, their faded grandeur creating a hauntingly beautiful backdrop. "Few tourists know this place," Eric explained as the gondolier discreetly positioned himself at the far end of the boat, giving them privacy while still steering. It was once the meeting place for nobles and their forbidden lovers. The romance of the setting wasn't lost on Lena. Overhead stars emerged in the velvet sky, while small lanterns on their gondola cast golden light across the water. From somewhere in the distance, faint strains of violin music drifted through the night. "You arranged the music too?" she asked, recognizing the elaborate planning behind this seemingly spontaneous excursion. "I may have requested a string quartet at the restaurant we're passing." His smile was boyish, pleased with himself, "though we'll be fashionably late for our reservation." Eric reached into his jacket, producing a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses that had been hidden somewhere in the gondola. As he poured, Lena found herself studying him with a healer's eye, noting how fully he had reclaimed his physical vitality, how the haunted shadow had vanished from his gaze. "You're staring," he observed, handing her a glass. "Professional habit," she replied, though they both knew her interest was far from clinical. "You've made a remarkable recovery. Thanks to my remarkable healer." He clinked his glass against hers. "To new beginnings." The champagne was perfectly chilled bubbles dancing on her tongue as Lena sipped. Venice by moonlight surrounded them, ancient, romantic, and timeless. In this setting, it was easy to believe they existed outside normal constraints, in a world where their disparate lives could somehow merge seamlessly. "What are you thinking?" Eric asked, setting aside his glass to take her hand. How could she explain the complexity of her thoughts? That she was falling for him, had already fallen but feared the real world waiting beyond this romantic bubble. That she worried his feelings were colored by the intense circumstances of his healing. That she couldn't imagine how a millionaire businessman and a nurse with unconventional methods could build anything lasting. Instead of voicing these doubts, Lena set down her own glass and moved toward him. "I'm thinking words are overrated," she whispered her lips, finding his in a kiss that quickly deepened. Eric's response was immediate and hungry, his arms encircling her waist to pull her onto his lap. The gondola rocked gently with their movement water lapping against its sides as their kissing grew more intense. Lena's hands slipped inside his jacket, feeling the heat of his body through the fine cotton of his shirt. "We have a dinner reservation," he reminded her between kisses, though his hands were already gathering the silk of her dress higher on her thighs. "I'm not particularly hungry," she breathed against his ear. "At least not for food." A groan escaped him as her meaning registered. Here, his voice held both surprise and unmistakable interest. The gondolier was positioned at the far end of the boat, his back diplomatically turned to them. The secluded lagoon was hidden from main waterways, cloaked in shadow and privacy. Here, Lena confirmed a boldness she'd never known before. Eric took hold of her. "Unless you're concerned about propriety." His answer was to capture her mouth in a kiss that left no doubt about his priorities. With the gondola gently rocking beneath them and Venice's moonlit spires as silent witnesses, they surrendered to desire that had been building all evening. Eric's hands moved with practiced skill beneath her dress as Lena worked at his belt, their breathing increasingly ragged. The need for silence added exquisite tension as they moved together, finding their rhythm with the water's gentle motion. When release finally came, Lena buried her face against Eric's shoulder to muffle her cry, his arms holding her tightly as tremors coursed through them both. Afterward, they remained entwined the gondola drifting in the small lagoon, the distant music providing a soundtrack to their gradual return to awareness. Eric brushed damp tendrils of hair from Lena's face, his expression tender in the lantern light. "I think we might have scandalized several generations of Venetian ghosts," he murmured, helping her rearrange her dress. Lena laughed softly, feeling reckless and alive in ways she never had before. "Something tells me they've seen worse over the centuries." They eventually made their way to the restaurant fashionably, late indeed for a midnight dinner on a terrace overlooking the Grand Canal. Throughout the meal, their eyes rarely left each other, conversation flowing as easily as the wine. To anyone observing them, they appeared exactly what their cover story suggested. A couple deeply in love, oblivious to anyone else. Back at the palazzo in the pre-dawn hours, their lovemaking took on a different quality, slower, more deliberate, as if both were memorizing each contour and response. Afterward, as Lena drifted toward sleep in Eric's arms, she heard him whisper words that simultaneously thrilled and terrified her. "I'm falling in love with you." She kept her breathing, even feigning sleep, rather than responding. The words hung in the darkness, both gift and complication. Their days in Venice passed in sensual exploration of the city and each other. By day they wandered narrow streets and hidden squares, Eric showing her favorite spots from previous visits. By night they discovered new dimensions of pleasure in each other's arms, their connection deepening beyond the physical. On their fourth evening, they attended a masquerade ball at a neighboring palazzo, an exclusive affair where ancient Venetian traditions were still observed. Lena wore a gown of deep emerald silk and a delicate mask adorned with peacock feathers, while Eric cut a striking figure in formal black, his mask simpler but no less elegant. Under the anonymity of masks, they danced with uninhibited closeness, Eric's hands possessive on her waist, her body responding to his guidance as naturally as in their most intimate moments. "No one knows who we are tonight," he whispered, lips brushing her ear as they moved to the music. "We could be anyone." "Who would you choose to be if not yourself?" Lena asked, curious about his answer. Eric considered this, twirling her in a graceful arc before pulling her back against him. "Someone simpler, someone who never learned to value wealth above connection." His eyes behind the mask were startlingly honest. "Someone worthy of a woman like you." The vulnerability in his voice caught Lena off guard. "You don't need to be anyone else for me, Eric, don't I?" His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "The man you met in Manhattan was broken in ways that went beyond what Sophia did. My whole life was built around acquisition, money, power, prestige. It took losing everything that mattered to see how empty that made me." Lena reached up to touch his face momentarily, forgetting they were surrounded by other dancers. The man I see now is healing, not just physically. Eric opened his mouth to respond, but froze suddenly, his body tensing against hers. Following his gaze across the ballroom, Lena saw a couple observing them from beside a marble column, a slender blonde woman in a red gown and a dark-haired man in gray. Even behind their ornate masks, something about their posture suggested recognition. Sophia, Eric confirmed, his voice tight. And Lucas. The magic of the evening shattered in an instant. Eric's hand found Lena's, gripping it with sudden urgency. We're leaving. Without waiting for her response, he led her through the crowd toward a side door. Moving with the familiarity of someone who knew the palazzo's layout intimately, they navigated a series of corridors and emerged onto a small private balcony overlooking a narrow canal. How did they recognize you? Lena asked, as Eric flagged down a passing water taxi with an urgent gesture. Doesn't matter. His expression had hardened behind the mask. What matters is getting you away from them. The protective instinct in his voice touched her, but Lena also recognized the wall rapidly rebuilding around him, the defense mechanism that had nearly destroyed his health months earlier. As the taxi pulled alongside the balcony's water steps, Eric helped her into the boat before joining her. Only when they were moving swiftly away from the palazzo did he remove his mask, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. I'm sorry, he said finally. I didn't expect them to be there. Lena removed her own mask, studying his face in the intermittent light from passing buildings. Are you okay? No. His honesty was startling. Seeing them should have devastated me. It's what I feared since leaving New York, that encountering them would trigger everything again. He turned to her, his expression clearing. But when I saw them, all I felt was nothing. No pain, no rage. They have no power over me anymore. The realization transformed his features, tension draining away to be replaced by wonder. Taking Lena's face between his hands, he kissed her with an intensity that left her breathless. You did that, he murmured against her lips. You healed more than my body. Back at the palazzo, their lovemaking took on a new dimension, Eric's passion fueled by emotional liberation rather than pain. He worshipped every inch of her body with focused attention, drawing responses from Lena she hadn't known herself capable of experiencing. As dawn light filtered through ancient Venetian glass, casting prismatic patterns across tangled sheets, Lena watched Eric sleep, his face, peaceful body strong against hers. In mere weeks, he had transformed from patient to lover, his recovery more complete than she could have imagined. The thought brought both professional satisfaction and personal fear. If his healing was complete, what purpose did she serve in his life? Would his feelings survive their return to reality, to the vast differences in their worlds and backgrounds? Eric stirred, eyes opening to find her watching him. Without words, he pulled her closer, his lips finding hers in a kiss that promised rather than demanded. When they finally separated, his expression was serious, despite their intimate position. Come with me to Switzerland, he said, fingers tracing the curve of her shoulder. There's a place in the Alps where we can be completely alone. No ghosts, no past, just us. Lena knew she should suggest returning to New York, instead to test whether their connection could survive in the real world. Professional ethics, long abandoned, whispered she needed distance to evaluate whether his feelings were genuine or merely gratitude elevated by passion. Instead, she found herself nodding, surrendering once more to the current flowing between them. Switzerland, she agreed, sealing the decision with a kiss that deepened rapidly into more. Reality would find them eventually, but not today. Chapter 5. Alpine Confessions. Eric's helicopter crested the final mountain ridge, revealing a modernist structure of glass and timber that seemed to grow organically from the alpine landscape. Nestled among towering pines with views of snow-covered peaks in every direction, the lodge appeared both imposing and perfectly integrated with its surroundings. It's breathtaking, Lena said, her voice barely audible over the helicopter's rotors as they began their descent. Eric squeezed her hand, enjoying her wonder. The Swiss property was perhaps his most personal, not a business acquisition or status symbol, but a retreat he'd designed himself after discovering this remote valley years ago. That he wanted to share it with her revealed more about his feelings than any words could express. As the helicopter settled onto a landing pad adjacent to the lodge, Lena took in details invisible from the air, the living roof planted with native alpine vegetation, walls of glass that reflected the mountains while allowing uninterrupted views from within a natural stream diverted to flow alongside the structure before cascading down to the valley below. No staff here, Eric explained as he helped her from the helicopter. Just us. I thought you might appreciate the privacy." The implication hung between them, no pretense needed here, no roles to play for others' benefit. In this isolated paradise, they could simply be Eric and Lena, free from the complications of their disparate worlds. Inside, the lodge revealed itself as a masterpiece of understated luxury. Soaring ceilings supported by massive timber beams created an airy central space, anchored by a stone fireplace, large enough to stand inside. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the alpine panorama like living art installations, while plush furnishings in neutral tones invited relaxation. "The kitchen is stocked," Eric said, leading her through the main space. "And there's a hot spring-fed pool on the lower terrace." "You've thought of everything," Lena observed, trailing her fingers along a smooth wooden banister as they ascended to the second level. The master suite occupied the entire upper floor, an open concept space where the bed faced windows overlooking the valley. A freestanding soaking tub positioned before another wall of glass offered bathers an uninterrupted view of snow-capped peaks. "This place suits you," Lena said, studying Eric against the backdrop of mountains more than your Manhattan penthouse. He moved behind her arms, encircling her waist, as they gazed out at the panorama. "It's authentic, not designed to impress others, but to satisfy something in yourself." She leaned back against his chest. "Your other homes feel curated. This one feels inhabited." Her insight startled him. Few people bothered looking beyond his wealth to see the man beneath. Yet Lena consistently peeled away his layers with disconcerting accuracy. That evening they prepared dinner together, a simple meal of alpine cheese, crusty bread and local cured meats accompanied by wine from a nearby vineyard. As darkness descended outside, Eric lit the massive fireplace, transforming the space with dancing light and shadow. They sat on a fur rug before the fire, wine glasses in hand, the domesticity of the scene striking both of them. This wasn't the fevered passion of Venice or the sun-soaked desire of Santorini, but something equally potent, an intimacy that transcended the physical. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Lena said, her profile gilded by firelight. Eric considered this, swirling wine in his glass. "My father never said he loved me." He finally answered, the confession emerging more easily than he expected. "Not once in 36 years. Lena's expression remained open, encouraging without pity. "Tell me about him." Henrik Larsson was an immigrant from Oslo who built a shipping company from nothing. Eric's voice took on a distant quality. Everything was measured in achievement grades, sports, business success. Nothing was ever enough. He competed with me as much as he parented me. "And your mother?" Beautiful, cultured, and completely intimidated by him. Eric shifted memories, clearly uncomfortable. "She tried to shield me from his criticism when I was young, but eventually surrendered to his vision of proper parenting, which was that showing affection created weakness." His laugh held no humor. "Ironic that I ended up proving him right, choosing a woman who saw me as a resource rather than a person." Lena set down her wine glass, moving closer to take his hand. "You proved nothing of the sort. Seeking connection isn't weakness, Eric. It's the most fundamental human need." The firelight played across her features, highlighting the compassion in her eyes. Eric reached out to trace the curve of her cheek, marveling at how this woman, initially hired for her healing abilities, had become essential to him in ways that transcended the physical. "Your turn," he said softly. "Something you've never told anyone." Lena's gaze dropped to their entwined fingers. "I've always been afraid that healing others is the only value I bring to relationships." Her voice grew keener. "That once people are whole, they won't need me anymore." The vulnerability in her admission struck Eric deeply. Here was the heart of her hesitation with him, the fear that his feelings stemmed from gratitude rather than genuine connection. "Lena," he said, tilting her chin up until their eyes met, "what I feel for you has nothing to do with what you've done for me, and everything to do with who you are." Her expression remained uncertain. "How can you be sure? We met under extraordinary circumstances." "In the real world, this is real," Eric interrupted, gesturing to the space between them. "More real than anything in my life before you." Before she could respond, he kissed her, not with the desperate hunger of their earlier encounters, but with deliberate tenderness. His hands framed her face as if holding something infinitely precious, his lips moving against hers in a promise beyond words. When they finally separated, Lena's eyes remained closed for a heartbeat, as if savoring the sensation. When they opened, Eric saw something had shifted in their depths, a surrender to possibility. The fire crackled and sparked as clothing was discarded, their bodies coming together on the fur rug in its warm glow. Unlike their passionate encounters in Venice, this union held a different quality, a reverence that acknowledged the deeper emotions now flowing between them. Later, wrapped in a cashmere throw before the dying embers, Lena rested her head on Eric's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. His fingers traced lazy patterns along her spine, neither feeling the need to break the peaceful silence. The following days unfolded in a rhythm entirely, their own mornings spent hiking through pristine snow afternoons, exploring each other's bodies with increasing familiarity. Evenings sharing stories before the fire, in this rarefied mountain air away from the complications of their regular lives, they created a private world where only they existed. On their fourth day, Eric suggested a snowshoeing expedition to a remote outlook accessible only in winter, when the frozen lake below could be crossed safely. They set out after breakfast, Eric carrying a small backpack with provisions. As they made their way through snow-laden pines, the physical challenge confirmed Eric's complete recovery. His powerful strides breaking trail through fresh powder, not a trace remaining of the weakness that had defined him when Lena first entered his life. She followed in his tracks, admiring the fluid strength of his movements, the man before her utterly transformed from the hollow-eyed patient in Manhattan. After an hour's hike, they emerged onto a rocky outcropping that offered a breathtaking panorama of the valley below. Jagged peaks stretched to the horizon, the winter sun, creating diamond-like brilliance on untouched snow. "I found this place by accident," Eric said, unslinging the backpack to retrieve a thermos of hot chocolate. "Got lost hiking one summer and stumbled across this view. Had to build the lodge after that." Lena accepted the steaming mug he offered her, cheeks flushed from exertion and cold. "It's like being on top of the world." "That's exactly how I feel right now," Eric said, his eyes on her rather than the view. "Like nothing can touch us here." The simple statement hung in the crystal air between them. Lena had never seen him so at peace. The driven businessman and broken patient, both replaced by a man fully present in the moment, at home in his own skin. As if reading her thoughts, Eric spoke again. "I don't want to go back," he said, surprising them both with his honesty. "We could stay here, or travel. See where this leads, without the complications waiting for us in New York." The temptation to agree was powerful. These weeks with Eric had awakened something in Lena. She'd never experienced a connection that satisfied body, mind, and spirit simultaneously. Yet she couldn't silence the practical voice reminding her their bubble would eventually burst against reality. Before she could respond, a mechanical chirp interrupted the pristine silence. Eric frowned, pulling a satellite phone from his backpack. "I only gave this number to Michael for absolute emergencies," he explained, stepping away to answer. Lena watched his expression change as he listened, the carefree lover replaced by the focused businessman in the space of seconds. His responses were clipped tension evident in the set of his shoulders. When he ended the call, his face had hardened in a way she hadn't seen since their early days in Manhattan. "What's happened?" she asked. "Sophia." The name fell like an icicle between them. "She's been giving interviews claiming my illness was fabricated for sympathy during our divorce proceedings." His jaw tightened. "And apparently there's speculation about who my mysterious new wife really is." Reality had found them, after all, crashing into their alpine paradise with the force of an avalanche. Chapter 6: Monaco's Betrayal. The helicopter carved through pristine mountain air, their journey back to civilization, markedly different from the hopeful arrival days earlier. Eric spoke rapidly into his phone, orchestrating damage control with surgical precision, while Lena stared silently at the magnificent Alps passing below. Their intimate sanctuary was now violated by the world's harsh intrusion. "We're not running from this," Eric announced after ending his call, his voice carrying through their headsets with steel-edged determination. "I'm done hiding, done letting others control the narrative of my life." Lena studied his determined expression. "What are you suggesting?" "The Monaco Grand Prix is this weekend. Sophia and Lucas will certainly be there. Her family never misses it." His eyes met hers, intensity blazing in their depths. "Let's confront this head-on. Show everyone that I'm fully recovered and moving forward." The prospect of deliberately entering Sophia's social circle sent anxiety spiraling through Lena. Their relationship had blossomed in private, away from scrutiny and comparison. Now Eric wanted to thrust them into the spotlight at one of Europe's most high-profile events. "Is that wise?" she asked carefully. Eric's hand covered hers. "I need to face them, Lena. To prove to myself that encounter in Venice wasn't a fluke, that they truly have no power over me anymore." His fingers tightened. "But I don't want to do it alone." The vulnerability beneath his determination decided her. "Then we'll do it together." 2 days later, Lena stood before a mirror in their suite at Monaco's Hotel de Paris, hardly recognizing the woman reflected back. The gown Eric had arranged, sharking creation in deep copper, that complemented her skin tone, perfectly transformed her into someone who looked like she belonged in his world of wealth and privilege. Eric appeared behind her, resplendent in a tuxedo that emphasized his restored physique. His arms encircled her waist as he pressed a kiss to her bare shoulder. "Nervous?" he asked, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "Terrified," she admitted. "I've never attended anything like this. What if I embarrass you?" Eric turned her to face him. "Impossible. Just be yourself, the woman who brought me back to life." His thumb traced her lower lip. "The woman I'm falling in love with." There it was again, that declaration that both thrilled and frightened her. This time Lena couldn't pretend she hadn't heard it. "Eric, you don't have to say it back," he interrupted gently. "I just need you to know where I stand. What's between us isn't casual for me, Lena. It never has been." Before she could respond, a knock announced their car had arrived. The moment for deeper conversation passed as they were swept into the glittering world of Monaco's elite during its most prestigious weekend. The Casino de Monte Carlo blazed with lights, its Belle Époque facade serving as a backdrop for an exclusive pre-race gala. Celebrities, royalty, and the ultra-wealthy mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, the air perfumed with expensive fragrances and ambition. Heads turned as Eric and Lena entered, curious gazes assessing them. Him, the notorious billionaire rumored to have suffered a breakdown after his wife's betrayal. Her, the unknown beauty on his arm, subject of increasing tabloid speculation. Erik Larson, a silver-haired man, approached, champagne flute in hand. "The prodigal returns to society. We've missed you at the Asia-Pacific merger talks." As Eric made introductions, Lena observed the subtle shift in his demeanor. The private man who'd held her through Alpine nights now wore his public persona like armor. She recognized it as protection rather than pretense, yet the contrast was jarring. Throughout the evening, Eric kept her close, his hand, a constant presence at the small of her back as they navigated the glittering crowd. He introduced her simply as Lena Marie, the woman who saved my life, allowing others to draw their own conclusions. The strategy worked brilliantly. Rather than seeming scandalized by their undefined relationship, the elite gathering was captivated by the romantic narrative, the mysterious healer who had restored the fallen titan. "They're watching us," Eric murmured as they danced, their bodies moving in practiced synchronization developed over weeks of intimacy. Third column from the left. Lena didn't need to look. She'd felt the hostile gaze burning into her back for the past half hour. "Sophia and Lucas, I presume." Eric's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Shall we say hello?" Her heart accelerated. But Lena maintained her composure. "Your call." With deliberate casualness, Eric guided their dance toward the column where a slender blonde woman in a crimson gown stood beside a dark-haired man. Even from a distance, Sophia's beauty was evident, cold and perfect like a diamond. Sophia, Eric greeted his ex-wife with remarkable calm as the music ended. "You're looking well." The blonde's perfectly arched eyebrows rose slightly. "Eric, quite the recovery you've made." Her gaze shifted to Lena, assessment turning to dismissal in the space of a heartbeat. Lucas remained silent beside her, discomfort evident in his rigid posture. "I've had excellent care," Eric replied, his arm sliding protectively around Lena's waist. "Lena, meet Sophia, and of course you remember Lucas. Your nurse, I presume." Sophia's smile was arctic, her perfect features arranged in practiced disdain. "How convenient that your professional relationship evolved so quickly. One might almost suspect it was planned. Tell me, does she charge by the hour or by the symptom?" The venomous insinuation hung in the air like poison. Eric's jaw clenched, rage flashing in his eyes, but before he could launch a retort that would create exactly the scene, Sophia wanted a cultured voice with a French accent, smoothly interrupted. "Lena Marie, it cannot be." An elegant older man in an impeccably tailored tuxedo approached, silver hair framing a face creased with intelligence and humor. Lena recognized him immediately, genuine surprise replacing her tension. "Dr. Fournier, the very same." He clasped her hands warmly. "When I heard rumors of an American nurse working miracles in Europe, I wondered if it might be my most brilliant student." Sophia's perfect composure faltered slightly as she observed the clear respect in Dr. Fournier's manner toward Lena. "You know each other?" Eric asked, unable to hide his curiosity. "Dr. Fournier was my mentor during my clinical rotation at Johns Hopkins," Lena explained. His research on mind-body healing techniques formed the foundation of my approach, which you've clearly perfected, Dr. Fournier said, with unmistakable pride. Your results with Mr. Larson are nothing short of remarkable based on what I've read. Sophia's attempted humiliation had backfired spectacularly. Rather than appearing as a gold digger or opportunist, Lena now stood validated by one of Europe's most respected medical innovators. Perhaps you'll join me for lunch tomorrow at my home, Dr. Fournier continued. I have a proposal that might interest you professionally. Before Lena could respond, Sophia interjected with forced brightness. How fascinating. But surely Eric wants to keep his miracle worker close. After all, who knows when he might need treatment again? The crude implication drew a flash of anger across Eric's features, but Dr. Fournier responded first. My dear, he said to Sophia, his tone pleasant but eyes. Cold healing is a gift few possess genuinely. Lena Marie's talents would be recognized in any circle where intelligence is valued over other attributes. Sophia's perfect complexion flushed at the gentle rebuke. Without another word, she took Lucas's arm and led him away, defeat evident in the stiffness of her departure. Formidable woman, Dr. Fournier observed, watching Sophia retreat, though not in the ways that truly matter. He turned back to Lena with genuine warmth. My invitation stands. Lunch tomorrow. My villa overlooks the racecourse, perfect viewing for Sunday's event. Lena glanced at Eric, who nodded encouragingly. We'd be delighted, she answered. Dr. Fournier's cliffside villa proved even more spectacular than promised, its terrace gardens descending toward the Mediterranean, while offering uninterrupted views of Monaco's famous street circuit below. Over an exquisite lunch served on a sun-dappled terrace, Dr. Fournier explained the purpose behind his invitation, an offer that would have seemed miraculous mere months ago. I'm establishing an integrative healing center in Monte Carlo, he explained, serving Lena a glass of local rosé, combining conventional medicine with traditional healing practices from around the world. Exactly what Lena has always envisioned, Eric commented, watching her face illuminate with interest. Precisely why I want her to head our mind-body healing division. Dr. Fournier continued. Your grandmother's techniques combined with your nursing credentials and obvious gift, they're exactly what we need. Lena set down her glass, stunned by the magnitude of the opportunity. You want me to relocate to Monaco, with an appropriate research budget and staff, Dr. Fournier confirmed. Complete freedom to develop your methodologies. We'd begin construction next month with doors opening by year's end. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of. Professionally validation of her unconventional approach, a platform to help countless patients' resources beyond anything she could access in her community clinic. It's an incredible opportunity, she said, carefully, acutely aware of Eric beside her. May I have some time to consider? Of course, Dr. Fournier smiled. Take the weekend. We can discuss details after you've had time to think. As their car wound back down the coastal road toward Monte Carlo, Eric remained uncharacteristically quiet. The Mediterranean sparkled below the landscape. Breathtaking, yet tension had crept between them. You should take it, Eric finally said, breaking the silence. It's perfect for you. Lena studied his profile, noting the careful control in his expression. It would mean moving to Monaco. I have property here, he responded with forced lightness. Could easily establish a European base. The practical solution couldn't address the deeper question hovering between them. What exactly were they to each other? Lovers certainly, friends yes. But beyond that, neither had defined what future they envisioned together. Is that what you want? Lena asked quietly. For us to continue whatever this is in Monaco. Eric's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What I want is for you to pursue your dreams without compromising for anyone, including me. His voice softened. I've seen what happens when someone abandons their purpose for a relationship, Lena. It breeds resentment eventually. His generosity only complicated her feelings further. Before arriving in Monaco, she'd begun imagining a future with Eric despite their differences. Now the professional opportunity of a lifetime had materialized, yet accepting it would fundamentally change whatever was growing between them. That night their lovemaking held a desperate edge, as if both sensed a precipice approaching but couldn't find words to navigate it. Eric's touch was possessive yet reverent, memorizing her body as though it might be the last time. Lena matched his intensity, pushing them both toward release that left them trembling and breathless in the darkness. Afterward, as Eric slept beside her, Lena slipped from bed and moved to the suite's balcony. Monaco glittered below, beautiful and alien. Could she build a life here? Would Eric truly relocate for her, or was that simply what he thought she wanted to hear? Her phone chimed softly with an incoming email. Opening it revealed a link to an online tabloid with the subject, "You should see this." The article that loaded made her blood run cold. Under the headline, "Larson's Nurse Exposed," it detailed alleged evidence of Lena Marie's history of targeting wealthy patients with a proven pattern of seduction for financial gain. The evidence was entirely fabricated, mentioning patients she'd never treated, incidents that never occurred, yet presented with enough specific details to seem credible. Worse, it revealed their marriage was a sham, threatening Eric's business reputation as collateral damage in its character assassination. The source remained anonymous, but the timing was too perfect to be coincidence, coming immediately after Dr. Fournier's offer. Lena leaned against the balcony rail, mind racing. If she stayed with Eric, these attacks would continue damaging his reputation along with hers. If she accepted Dr. Fournier's offer, her professional credibility would be undermined before she even began. The choice crystallized with devastating clarity. There was only one way to protect both Eric and her professional future. By dawn, she had packed her small suitcase and written a note explaining her decision to return to New York alone. The gossip would eventually fade if she removed herself from Eric's life. Dr. Fournier's offer could be revisited when the scandal died down. As she placed the note on her pillow beside Eric's sleeping form, tears blurred her vision. Their time together had transformed them both. His body healed, her heart awakened. But perhaps that had been their purpose in each other's lives. All along, a temporary healing. Neither had expected, but both had needed. With one last look at the man who had become so unexpectedly essential to her, Lena quietly closed the hotel room door behind her. Chapter 7: New Orleans Refuge. Eric woke, reaching for Lena's warmth, his hands finding only cold sheets and a folded note on her pillow. The moment he read her careful handwriting explaining her departure, something shattered inside him. A pain different from Sophia's betrayal, yet equally devastating. This wasn't betrayal, but sacrifice. Lena had left not to wound him, but to shield him from scandal. That knowledge made her absence not less painful, but more unbearable. How could he fight against her selflessness, her misguided protection, that cut him more deeply than any betrayal? Within an hour, Eric had his security team searching Monaco, but Lena had vanished, completely checked out of the hotel before dawn, taken a taxi to Nice, and from there her trail went cold. His calls went straight to voicemail, emails unreturned. A week later, back in New York, Eric stared out at the Manhattan skyline from his penthouse office. Physically, he remained healthy. Lena's healing had taken root completely. Emotionally, he felt hollowed out, caught in a limbo between the broken man he'd been before her and the man he'd glimpsed becoming with her. "We found something," Michael announced, entering with a tablet. The nursing board received an anonymous complaint questioning Lena Marie's ethics in her treatment of you. They've suspended her license, pending investigation. Eric's fist came down hard on his desk. "This is Sophia's work. Have our legal team." "Already on it," Michael interrupted. "But there's more, Lena." Concurrent response continuation. Marie has formally resigned from her position at the community clinic in Harlem. According to her colleagues, she's left New York entirely. The revelation struck Eric like a physical blow. Lena had lost not just him, but her professional standing, the career she'd worked so hard to build, all because she'd agreed to help him when no one else could. "Find her," Eric ordered, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Whatever it takes." In the weeks that followed, Eric threw himself into 2 parallel missions, clearing Lena's name and locating her. His legal team systematically dismantled the false accusations against her, while private investigators searched for any trace of where she might have gone. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Fournier called from Monaco with information he thought Eric should have. "After Lena Marie declined my offer so suddenly, I had my suspicions about that convenient exposé," the doctor explained. "My team traced the article to a shell company owned by Sophia's family holding corporation." "Can you prove it?" Eric asked, hope flaring for the first time in weeks. "Already have Dr. Fournier confirmed. My lawyers forwarded everything to your team this morning. It should be more than enough to clear Lena Marie's name." Armed with this evidence, Eric confronted Sophia directly in her Manhattan apartment, recording their conversation, as his investigators had advised. Faced with irrefutable proof, she admitted orchestrating the smear campaign out of jealousy and spite. "You were never supposed to recover." She spat her beautiful face distorted with bitterness. You were supposed to spiral downward, make business mistakes, become the pitiful ex-husband while I thrived with Lucas. Instead, I found Lena. Eric replied calmly. A nobody nurse from nowhere, Sophia scoffed. What could she possibly offer someone like you? Eric studied the woman he'd once believed he loved, seeing only a stranger. Everything that matters, he answered simply. Everything you never understood about me. With the recording secured, Eric's legal team quickly cleared Lena's professional reputation. The nursing board reinstated her license with a formal apology, and the tabloids that had run the false stories printed retractions. Yet Lena herself remained elusive until a former colleague from the Harlem clinic finally provided the missing piece. She had returned to New Orleans to her grandmother's home in the historic Treme neighborhood. Eric's private jet touched down in New Orleans on a steamy August afternoon, the air heavy with humidity and the scent of magnolia. He'd researched the address thoroughly, but was still unprepared for the modest shotgun house on a narrow street, lined with similar homes, their weathered wood, painted in faded pastels, small porches adorned with potted plants and rocking. To share. Lena's grandmother's home stood out only for the profusion of herbs growing in containers along the steps and the small hand-painted sign by the door reading Mama Celeste's Healing Herbs Appointments Only. Eric hesitated on the sidewalk, suddenly uncertain. His tailored linen suit and designer shoes marked him as an outsider in this close-knit neighborhood where children played on front stoops and elderly residents watched the world from porch swings. Would Lena even want to see him? Or had she truly meant to make a clean break? Before he could decide, the front door opened, and an elderly woman with Lena's same warm brown eyes appeared. Her silver-streaked hair was wrapped in a colorful scarf, her dress simple, but dignified. You planning to stand there all day, Mr. Larson? She called, her voice carrying the same New Orleans cadence as Lena, but deepened by age and perhaps wisdom. Startled, Eric approached the steps. You know who I am? My granddaughter doesn't waste her heart on just anyone, Mama Celeste replied, studying him with penetrating insight. Figured you'd show up eventually. She stepped aside, gesturing him in. She's not here right now, working at the community clinic over on Claiborne. The interior was modest, but immaculately kept, filled with an eclectic mix of antique furniture and modern necessities. What caught Eric's attention, however, were the plant's dozens of varieties growing in every available space, filling the air with herbal fragrances. This is where Lena learned her healing methods, he realized aloud. Some of them, Mama Celeste confirmed, indicating he should sit at a small kitchen table while she poured 2 glasses of amber liquid that proved to be sweet tea. The rest she learned in those fancy schools she worked so hard to attend. Eric accepted the tea gratefully, the cold glass a relief against the day's heat. Did she tell you about me, about us? Enough. The old woman's gaze was direct, but not unkind. Said you needed healing and found it. Said she broke her own rules and got her heart involved. Said leaving was the only way to protect you both. She was wrong about that last part, Eric said quietly. Mama Celeste sipped her tea, considering him. Maybe so, but my Lena spent her whole life healing. Others never learned how to let someone heal her. The insight resonated deeply. Eric had been so focused on what Lena had done for him that he'd overlooked what she herself might need. Where can I find this clinic, he asked. Mama Celeste gave him directions but added, she's different here. This is her roots, her foundation. If you're expecting the woman who fit into your world of wealth and privilege, you might be surprised. The community clinic occupied a converted storefront with peeling paint and a window unit air conditioner, working overtime against the Louisiana heat. Inside, the waiting room was crowded with patients of all ages, mostly Black and Latino families from the surrounding neighborhood. Through an open door, Eric caught sight of Lena before she saw him. She wore simple scrubs, her hair pulled back, moving with quiet efficiency between examination rooms. No trace remained of the elegant woman who had turned heads in Monaco's casino, yet watching her here in her element, she had never seemed more beautiful to him. When she emerged from an exam room with a file in hand, she froze upon seeing him. Her professional composure briefly shattered. Eric, she whispered, color draining from her face. Around them, the busy clinic continued its rhythm, but for Eric, the world narrowed to the woman before him, the space between them charged with unspoken emotions. Your grandmother said I'd find you here, he explained, acutely aware of curious gazes from staff and patients alike. Lena recovered quickly, her professional mask sliding back into place. I have patients waiting. We can't do this now. When Eric pressed quietly, she glanced at the clock. I finish at 7. Meet me at St. Eustemi, Louis Cemetery. Number 1. By the entrance. The hours until 7 stretched endlessly. Eric walked the French Quarter, trying to absorb the city that had shaped Lena to understand this vital piece of her identity. New Orleans pulsed with life around him, music spilling from doorways, the mingled aromas of Creole cooking locals and tourists, navigating the narrow streets with equal enthusiasm. This vibrant, passionate city explained so much about Lena, her resilience, her belief in healing, that transcended conventional understanding, her ability to embrace life's complexities without judgment. The cemetery, when he arrived, offered stark contrast to City of the Dead, with its above-ground tombs and mausoleums stretching in orderly rows. Lena was already waiting, changed from scrubs into a simple sundress, her natural hair loose around her shoulders. Seeing her again, Eric felt something shift back into place inside him, a recognition of essential rightness, despite all their complications. "You cleared my name," she said without preamble. "The nursing board contacted me last week." Sophia confessed to fabricating everything Eric confirmed. "Your reputation is fully restored." Lena nodded, once arms crossed protectively across her body. "Thank you for that." "I didn't do it expecting gratitude," Eric said quietly. "I did it because it was right." They walked together through the cemetery in silence, the late evening sun casting long shadows across weathered stone. Around them, New Orleans prepared for nightfall, the distant sounds of jazz and laughter carrying on the humid air. "Why did you leave like that?" Eric finally asked the question that had haunted him for weeks. Lena stopped beside an ornate tomb, adorned with fading offerings. "To protect you, your reputation, your business interests. They were all at risk because of me. That wasn't your decision to make." Eric countered frustration, edging his voice. "I'm not some fragile patient anymore, Lena. I'm a man who is falling in love with you." The past tense wasn't lost on her. Pain flickered across her features before she looked away. "Monaco made it clear our worlds are too different, Eric. I never belonged in that life. And I don't belong here," he acknowledged, gesturing to the city around them. "But that doesn't mean we can't find our own place together." Lena shook her head unconvinced. "It was a beautiful dream, what we had in Europe. But dreams end when reality intrudes. Unless we fight for them." Eric insisted, closing the distance between them to take her hands. "I've spent 6 weeks searching for you, Lena. Not because I need healing anymore, but because I need you." The raw honesty in his voice broke through her careful defenses. Tears gathered in her eyes as she finally allowed herself to meet his gaze fully. "I've missed you," she whispered, the simple admission costing her visibly. "Every day." The confession hung between them, fragile and precious. Before Eric could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent alert, the first notification he hadn't silenced since arriving in New Orleans. "Ignore it," he said, focusing entirely on Lena. She shook her head, pragmatic as always. "It might be important." Reluctantly, Eric checked the screen, his expression shifting to concern. "There's a hurricane forming in the Gulf Category 3, projected to strengthen to 4 before landfall." When Lena asked, immediately alert, 36 hours. "They're calling it Hurricane Katrina." Something like resignation crossed Lena's features. "Evacuation orders will come soon. You should leave while flights are still possible." "I'm not leaving without you," Eric stated firmly. "I can't leave," Lena countered. "Grandmother won't evacuate, says she's survived worse than any hurricane, and the clinic has patients who will need help preparing." Eric recognized the determination in her stance, the same quiet strength that had first commanded his attention in his Manhattan bedroom. "Then I'm staying too," he decided instantly. "Eric, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," he interrupted. "I lost you once through miscommunication and assumption. I won't lose you again to a storm." As twilight deepened around them, they stood at an impasse that mirrored their larger situation, two people from different worlds bound by feelings. Neither could deny facing forces beyond their control. The distant sound of emergency sirens broke the moment, a prescient warning of what approached. Without further discussion, they left the cemetery together, united, at least in the immediate challenge of preparing for the coming storm. Neither could have imagined how the hurricane would transform not just the city around them, but the very foundation of their relationship. Chapter 8. The Storm's Revelation. As Hurricane Katrina approached New Orleans, the city transformed. Evacuation traffic jammed highways, while those staying behind secured homes with practiced efficiency. Eric found himself in Mama Celeste's kitchen, helping pack precious herbs and remedies into waterproof containers. The elderly healer had flatly refused evacuation. "At least let me arrange for a generator and supplies," Eric insisted. Mama Celeste gave him an assessing look. "We accept your help, Mr. Larson, but understand we're not charity cases. We survive because we know how." Eric recognized he was the outsider here, his wealth meaningless against both the approaching storm and this family's deep-rooted pride. "Consider it a partnership, not charity," he offered. That evening, Eric found Lena on the small back porch, watching dark clouds gather. "I've secured a hotel room at the Windsor Court," he said. "Higher ground, hurricane-proof. We could all go." Lena shook her head. "She won't leave these plants. They represent 5 generations of healers' knowledge." Her gaze remained fixed on the darkening sky. "Besides, Trimi is home. You face threats differently on your own ground." The approaching storm highlighted their fundamental differences: Eric's instinct to control circumstances versus Lena's acceptance of forces beyond control. Yet somehow these differences now seemed like complementary strengths rather than barriers. The clinic called Lena continued. "Several elderly patients in the neighborhood have no transportation. We're checking on them tonight." "I'm coming with you," Eric stated firmly. The next several hours revealed a side of Lena that Eric had glimpsed but never fully witnessed: her deep connection to her community. In home after home, elderly residents greeted her with familiar affection, while Eric found himself boarding windows and moving furniture to higher ground. At their final stop, the home of Miss Evelyn, an 83-year-old former schoolteacher who refused evacuation, Eric overheard a conversation. "Your young man works hard, Miss," Evelyn told Lena. "Different from that doctor fellow you used to bring around. Eric is complicated." Lena responded softly. "Ain't nothing complicated about the way he looks at you, child. That's a man who knows what he wants." Walking back through nearly deserted streets, Eric finally asked, "Who was the doctor she mentioned?" "Nathan, my ex-fiancé," Lena replied, her tone discouraging further questions. "He was doing a rural medicine rotation here. It's where we met." By midnight, the storm's outer bands reached New Orleans. Inside Mama Celeste's house, they had moved valuables to upper shelves and prepared an interior bathroom as an emergency shelter. Eric took the first watch while Lena and her grandmother rested. He stood at the window watching palm trees bend at impossible angles in the strengthening wind. "Impressive, isn't it?" Mama Celeste's voice startled him as she joined him at the window. "Terrifying," Eric corrected honestly. She chuckled. "Nature reminds us of our proper place sometimes. Even powerful men need reminding." Eric turned to face her directly. "You don't approve of me for your granddaughter." "Didn't say that." Mama Celeste settled into a chair. "Just wondering if you understand what loving Lena really means." The directness caught him off guard. They hadn't spoken of love since his confession in Monaco. "My granddaughter heals others because she understands brokenness from the inside," she continued. "Lost her parents young, watched me struggle to maintain our traditions while the world called them superstition. She pushed herself through nursing school, working 3 jobs because she wanted to combine our ways with modern medicine." Pride colored her voice. Then that doctor came along, made her think she had to choose, that her heritage was something to overcome, not embrace. That's why she left him, Eric realized. Mama Celeste nodded. He wanted her to be something other than herself, smaller, more conventional. Her eyes narrowed. "What do you want her to be, Mr. Larson?" "Nothing other than who she is," Eric answered without hesitation. "It's who she is that saved me. Not just physically, but in every way that matters." A tremendous crash interrupted them. In Lena's bedroom, a large oak branch had smashed through the window. For the next hour, they worked together to secure the broken window with boards and plastic. "The eye's coming," Mama Celeste announced. "We'll have a brief calm. Use it to check the roof." Within an hour, the howling wind ceased abruptly. Eric followed Lena onto the roof through a small hatch. The view was surreal. Devastation in every direction, yet above a perfect circle of calmer sky showed stars. As they finished securing loose shingles, Eric caught Lena's arm. "When this is over, we need to talk about us. Really talk without assumptions or fear." "Eric, I love you." He interrupted the declaration, simple but profound. "Not because you healed me, but because of who you are. The healer, the granddaughter, the community nurse, the passionate woman I held in my arms. All of you. Not just the parts that fit conveniently into my world." Before Lena could respond, Mama Celeste called urgently from below. "Lena, phone call. The clinic's flooding. Miss Evelyn's trapped." After a brief conversation, Lena's expression hardened with determination, waters rising fast. "Miss Annie, Evelyn's trapped in her attic. She's diabetic and left her insulin downstairs. You can't go out in this," Eric protested, even as he recognized the futility of his objection. "She'll die without it," Lena stated, simply already pulling on a rain jacket. "Then we're both going," Eric declared, reaching for his own jacket. The streets had become canals, murky water carrying debris. They navigated carefully in a small boat from Mama Celeste's shed, Eric providing the strength to propel it while Lena directed their course. "Miss, Evelyn's street was barely recognizable, water reaching porch roofs. They found the elderly woman trapped in her attic, calling weakly through a small window. We won't make it back to Treme before the eye passes," Lena shouted over the returning wind. The clinic's closer and on higher ground. Inside the community clinic, emergency lights cast ghostly illumination. Lena immediately took Miss Evelyn to an examination room, locating insulin supplies and beginning treatment. As the hurricane reached its second peak, hurling debris against the clinic's windows, Eric helped Lena make Miss Evelyn comfortable. "You should rest too," Lena noting her exhaustion. "I'm fine," she insisted automatically. "You're not," he countered gently, "and that's okay. Even healers need rest sometimes." With a sigh, she sank into a chair, accepting the water bottle Eric offered. "What you said on the roof," Lena began hesitantly, "about loving all of me. I meant it," Eric interrupted. "But I need to know if there's any part of you that could love all of me too." "Eric, I started falling for you before I even admitted it to myself," Lena confessed. "I felt something from the first moment I saw you, broken, bitter, but still essentially you." "Then why leave in Monaco?" he asked. "Because I was terrified," she admitted, "not just of the scandal, but of losing myself in your world of not being enough." "Not being enough," Eric echoed incredulously. "Lena, you're everything." The building shuddered violently as something struck the roof. The lights flickered, then plunged them into darkness. They rushed down the hallway to find part of the ceiling collapsed in Miss Evelyn's room. Eric saw only that the elderly woman lay directly beneath the collapsing section. Without thought, he lunged forward, shielding her with his body as debris crashed down. Pain exploded across his back and shoulders. Looking down, he discovered a jagged piece of metal embedded in his arm, blood flowing steadily. "Don't move," Lena ordered suddenly beside him, her healer's hands already assessing the damage. After removing the metal and cleaning the wound, Lena used butterfly bandages and pressure dressings to close it. "You're lucky," she told him. 2 inches to the left, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Seems fitting that you're patching me up again." Eric managed a weak smile. Full circle. Lena's professional demeanor cracked, emotion bleeding through as she touched his face. "Don't joke. You could have been killed." "Worth it," he murmured, catching her hand. Something shifted in Lena's expression, a recognition that transcended their circumstances. Eric had acted instinctively to protect a stranger, risking himself without hesitation. "You never needed healing," she whispered, the revelation dawning in her eyes like sunrise. "Your body was broken, but your heart, your essential self, was always whole. I was blind to not see it before now," she continued. "My grandmother told me something I never fully understood until this moment, that true healers recognize each other's souls across time and circumstance, that when we find each other, we create something more powerful than either could manifest alone." Eric's hand tightened around hers, his eyes never leaving her face. "Is that what we found? What we are to each other?" Instead of answering with words, Lena leaned forward, her lips meeting his in a kiss that transcended physical desire, a recognition of twin spirits, an acceptance of destined connection, the profound homecoming of 2 souls who had finally found their missing halves. Outside, Hurricane Katrina continued its destructive path. Unaware, it had forced a profound revelation that sometimes the deepest healing comes not from fixing what's broken, but from recognizing what remains unbreakably whole. Chapter 9. The street orm within and without. Dawn broke over a devastated New Orleans. Hurricane Katrina had finally passed, leaving destruction in its wake. Streets flooded, buildings damaged, ancient oaks uprooted. The clinic where Eric, Lena, and Miss Evelyn had sheltered stood damaged but intact, a testament to sturdy construction and good fortune. Eric's wounded arm throbbed beneath Lena's careful bandaging, but his spirit had never felt more whole. Something fundamental had shifted between them during those terrifying hours, the final barriers dissolving in the storm's crucible. The streets are still flooded, but emergency services are mobilizing. Lena reported returning from checking the clinic's emergency radio. They're prioritizing medical facilities. Should have help here within hours. Eric studied her, face exhausted but determined mud, streaking her cheek hair wild from the night's events. Even disheveled and drained, she radiated a strength that had nothing to do with physical power. "What happens now?" he asked quietly, the question encompassing far more than their immediate situation. Lena understood his meaning. She sat beside him on the examination table where he rested her hand, finding his. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm tired of running from us." Outside, the first distant sounds of rescue helicopters became audible over the drip of receding floodwater. The outside world intruding once more. "Your grandmother will be worried." Eric realized suddenly. Lena nodded. "The satellite phone's dead, but she survived worse storms. She'll be okay until we can get back." Their worried speculation proved unnecessary. By mid-morning, a National Guard rescue boat arrived at the clinic with an unexpected passenger. Mama Celeste herself, looking remarkably composed despite the circumstances. "Figured you two would end up here," she said by way of greeting, stepping carefully from the boat with the guardsman's assistance. Brought fresh clothes and proper bandages. She eyed Eric's injury with professional assessment. Not bad work considering the conditions. Lena embraced her grandmother with visible relief. "How did you find us?" "Child, I've lived through more hurricanes than you've had birthdays. Know every evacuation route and rescue procedure." She patted Lena's cheek affectionately before turning serious eyes to Eric. "How's that arm feeling?" "I'll live," he replied with a slight smile. "Your granddaughter has skilled hands among other qualities." Mama Celeste observed dryly, her knowing gaze moving between them. The clinic quickly became a makeshift community center. As recovery efforts began, Eric found himself working alongside local volunteers, distributing supplies and helping coordinate communications with his satellite phone. Once Mama Celeste produced the spare battery pack she'd thought to bring, by afternoon as Miss Evelyn and other elderly patients were evacuated to proper medical facilities. Lena found Eric on the clinic's water-damaged porch, using his business connections to arrange emergency generators for neighborhood cooling stations. "You're good at this," she observed, handing him a bottle of water. "At what?" "Calling in favors." Helping without taking over, she clarified. "At seeing what's needed and providing it without making people feel like charity cases." Eric had never considered his actions in that light. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." "Exactly." Lena smiled, the simple expression illuminating her tired face. "That's what we've been doing all along, isn't it?" What needed to be done? You needed healing. I needed to heal. Now New Orleans needs both our strengths. The simple insight crystallized something Eric had been feeling since the hurricane's eye, that their apparently different worlds might complement rather than conflict. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice taking on the resonant quality it held, only when speaking from his deepest convictions about us, about creating something neither of us could build alone. His eyes held such intensity that Lena's breath caught. Before he could continue this crucial conversation, a community organizer called urgently for her help with medication distribution. The moment suspended between them, shimmering with possibility as immediate needs once again demanded they postpone the future. They both now sensed waiting for them. That evening, returning to Mama Celeste's miraculously intact house, save for the boarded window and some water damage, Eric felt something he'd rarely experienced: bone-deep exhaustion coupled with profound satisfaction. This wasn't the intellectual accomplishment of closing a business deal, but something more fundamental, having contributed something essential with his own hands and heart. After showering away the hurricane's grime in Mama Celeste's ancient but functional bathroom, Eric found Lena on the back porch swing, gazing at stars now visible through dispersing clouds. She had changed into clean clothes, her hair still damp, looking younger somehow in the porch light. "Grandmother's gone to bed," she said, as he joined her on the swing. "Said to tell you there's gumbo on the stove if you're hungry." Later, Eric replied, settling beside her, their shoulders touching, a simple contact that felt more intimate than their passionate encounters in Europe. They sat in companionable silence, the neighborhood around them eerily quiet, save for occasional generator hums and distant emergency sirens. The storm had passed, but its aftermath would linger for weeks, rebuilding, restoring, healing. I need to tell you something, Lena said, finally her voice soft in the humid night air before we talk about what comes next. Eric waited, sensing her need to find her own words. When I left Monaco, I thought I was protecting you, but I was also protecting myself, her fingers twisted together in her lap. I was afraid of how much I needed you. Not your wealth or position, but you. That terrified me more than any scandal. The admission clearly cost her, this woman, who had always been the healer rather than the vulnerable one. And now Eric prompted gently. Now I'm still afraid, she admitted, but I'm more afraid of not trying, of wondering what might have been. Her eyes met his directly. I love you, Eric. Not the patient I healed, but the man I've come to know, complex, sometimes difficult, but fundamentally good. The words he'd longed to hear since Monaco washed over him like balm. Eric reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that conveyed reverence beyond physical desire. I've been thinking about your clinic in Harlem, he said. The words carefully chosen about what you were trying to create there. Integrating traditional healing with modern medicine, serving people who fall through the cracks. Lena watched him curiously, unsure where this was leading. What if we built something similar here? Eric continued. Not Dr. Fournier's luxury healing center for the wealthy, but something that honors your grandmother's traditions while providing real medical services to this community. Lena's expression shifted from confusion to dawning understanding. You want to fund a clinic in Treme. I want to partner with you to create what you've always envisioned. Eric corrected. Your knowledge and expertise, my resources and business acumen, something neither of us could create alone. The proposal hung between them, not just a professional opportunity, but a blueprint for their shared future. A way to blend their worlds, rather than requiring either to abandon their essence. You'd do that, Lena asked, searching his face. Invest in my community work within my world, instead of asking me to join yours. I'd do anything to build a life with you, Eric replied simply. But this isn't sacrifice, Lena. These past days have shown me there's fulfillment in this work I never found in boardrooms and investment portfolios. Before Lena could respond, Mama Celeste's voice interrupted from the doorway. If you two are done deciding the future of my neighborhood, I suggest you come eat before the gumbo gets cold. They turned to find the elderly woman watching them with thinly veiled amusement. How long have you been standing there? Lena asked suspiciously. Long enough, her grandmother replied cryptically. Mr. Larson, I believe you finally understood what loving my granddaughter actually means. With that pronouncement, she disappeared back into the house, leaving them alone once more. Is she right? Lena asked, vulnerability and hope mingled in her expression. Do you understand what loving me means? Eric considered the journey that had brought them here from his sickbed in Manhattan to a hurricane-ravaged porch in New Orleans, from strangers playing roles to people who had seen each other's truest selves. It means building something new together, he answered his hand, finding hers in the darkness, not your world or mine, but ours. As their lips met in a kiss that held promise rather than goodbye, Eric knew with absolute certainty that Hurricane Katrina had destroyed much, but created something even more precious, the foundation for a love that could weather any storm, inner or outer. Chapter 10. The Perfect Union. 6 months transformed Treme in ways both visible and profound. Where Hurricane Katrina had left destruction, renewal now blossomed. At the heart of this renaissance stood the Larson Marie Healing Center, its doors officially opening today to the community that had embraced both its founders. Eric stood on the rooftop garden, surveying what they'd created. The former community clinic had been completely rebuilt and expanded, blending traditional New Orleans architecture with state-of-the-art medical facilities. Medicinal herbs grew in carefully tended beds, many transplanted from Mama Celeste's garden, creating a space that honored healing traditions while embracing modern medicine. Having pre-opening jitters, Lena's voice came from behind him as she joined him at the railing. The morning sunlight caught the simple diamond on her left hand, not the ostentatious stone his wealth could have provided, but an heirloom that had belonged to his grandmother, a woman who had shown him the only genuine love in his childhood. Not jitters, Eric replied, drawing her against him. Pride in what we've built together. These months had brought changes neither could have imagined in Monaco. Eric had restructured his business operations, delegating day-to-day management to focus on the healing center and their life together. Lena had integrated her grandmother's traditional knowledge with her nursing expertise, creating treatment protocols that were already attracting attention from medical journals. Your grandmother seems to be enjoying her role as resident elder, Eric observed with a smile. Mama Celeste had her own consultation room in the center, where patients could seek her wisdom alongside conventional treatment. She's happier than I've seen her in years. Lena agreed, though she claims you still need work on your herb identification. Their laughter mingled in the warm morning air, easy and genuine, in a way that reflected their relationship's evolution from patient and healer to equal partners in all things. The past months hadn't been without challenges. Eric's business associates had questioned his radical life change. Lena had faced skepticism from medical colleagues about both her unconventional methods and her relationship with the wealthy investor funding them. Yet together they'd weathered each storm, their bond strengthening with every challenge overcome. We should head downstairs, Lena said, checking her watch. The ribbon cutting is in 20 minutes. Half the neighborhood is already gathering. Eric held her back gently, his expression growing serious. Before we go down there, I need to ask you something. Lena raised an eyebrow, curious. We're already engaged, Eric. What more could you possibly need to ask? Instead of answering immediately, Eric led her to a section of the garden they'd dedicated to memory plants, herbs believed to preserve and honor remembrances. In the center stood a small stone bench inscribed with words from Lena's grandmother. True healing begins with the heart. Remember what you told me in the clinic during the hurricane, Eric asked, taking both her hands in his, about true healers recognizing each other across time and circumstance. Lena nodded, her eyes softening at the memory. I've been thinking about that, Eric continued, about how extraordinary it is that of all the specialists my staff could have found, they brought me you. How against all odds and sense we found not just healing but home in each other. From his pocket, Eric produced a simple band of platinum woven with gold, designed to sit alongside her engagement ring. We've talked about a wedding next spring, but I don't want to wait. Marry me today, Lena. Here in this place we've built together, surrounded by the community that's become our family. Lena's eyes widened with surprise. Today. But there's no preparation, no. There's everything that matters, Eric interrupted gently. Your grandmother may have helped me plan this. The community center director is ordained. Your favorite jazz quartet is already booked for the opening reception. Tears gathered in Lena's eyes, not of sadness but overwhelming joy. You planned all this without my knowledge. Consider it my final act of independence before a lifetime of partnership. Eric smiled, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. What do you say, Lena Marie? Will you become my wife today, not in some elaborate ceremony months from now, but here now in the place that represents everything we are together? Lena's answer came not in words but in action, rising on tiptoes to press her lips against his, in a kiss that held all the passion of their early encounters in Santorini and Venice, yet tempered with the deeper connection they forged in New Orleans. When they separated, her smile rivaled the morning sun in brightness. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Today, now, forever. The ribbon-cutting ceremony transformed seamlessly into a wedding that no one who attended would ever forget. As neighborhood children scattered flower petals, Lena walked toward Eric on Mama Celeste's arm, wearing not a formal wedding gown but a simple dress in ivory linen, her natural hair adorned with small white flowers from the rooftop garden. Eric waited beneath an arch entwined with healing herbs, his eyes never leaving hers as she approached. The gathered community, patients, neighbors, staff, and a few selected friends from Eric's former life formed a circle of support around them. We gather today not just to open doors, but to celebrate a union. The officiant began a union of two people who found each other across different worlds and recognized in each other something essential and true. Their vows were simple but profound, acknowledging the extraordinary journey that had brought them together and promising to continue healing each other and the world around them. When Eric slipped the woven band onto Lena's finger alongside her engagement ring, his hands were steady but his eyes betrayed the depth of his emotion. With the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant declared to enthusiastic applause. What healing has joined together, let nothing tear asunder. Their kiss as newlywed partners sealed more than a marriage ceremony. It represented the perfect union of strengths, the blending of worlds once thought incompatible, the healing of wounds both had carried too long alone. The celebration continued through the afternoon, spilling from the center into surrounding streets in true New Orleans fashion. Music, food, and laughter created the perfect backdrop for this next chapter of their lives. As evening approached, Eric and Lena slipped away from the festivities, making their way to the private courtyard behind Mama Celeste's house, the place where their New Orleans journey had begun. Happy, Eric asked, drawing his new wife close in the privacy of gathering twilight. Beyond words, Lena replied, her head resting naturally against his shoulder. If someone had told me when I first walked into your Manhattan bedroom that we'd end up here, you wouldn't have believed it, Eric finished for her. Neither would I, but something in me recognized you even then. I think some part of me knew you were what I'd been missing. The admission held no vulnerability now, only certainty and gratitude. They had both come so far from that first meeting. Eric, no longer the broken man hiding from life. Lena, no longer the healer afraid to need healing herself. I have something for you, Eric said, producing a small package from his pocket. A wedding gift. Lena unwrapped it carefully to reveal an antique compass, its face beautifully preserved, despite its obvious age. It's lovely, she said, examining the detail work, but I don't understand. Open it, Eric encouraged. When she did, she found an inscription inside the lid, freshly engraved in elegant script. From patient to healer, to partner to love, our journey across worlds, to find home in each other. Emotion welled in Lena's eyes as she traced the words with her fingertip. It's perfect. I wanted to give you something that represented our journey. Eric explained how we navigated uncharted territory together and found our true direction in each other. As twilight deepened around them, their lips met in a kiss that held nothing back, no reservation, no uncertainty, just the pure connection of two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, but hadn't known they were seeking. Later that night, as they lay tangled together in the bedroom of the French Quarter apartment they now shared, not staying at Mama Celeste's, Lena propped herself on an elbow to study her husband's face in the moonlight streaming through tall windows. What? Eric asked, catching her thoughtful expression. I was just thinking about that contract we made when we first met, Lena said with a smile. Me pretending to be your wife to provide healing services. Eric laughed softly at the memory. Life has a strange way of making fiction into truth. Not strange. Lena corrected her finger, tracing the outline of his jaw. Perfect. As if everything, your illness, my methods, even Hurricane Katrina, was guiding us to exactly where we needed to be. As Eric drew her down for another kiss, their bodies melding with the perfect familiarity of souls who had found their missing halves, neither could have expressed more perfectly the truth burning in their hearts that in finding each other across impossible divides, they had each discovered their truest selves. And in healing each other's deepest wounds, they had forged something transcendent and unbreakably powerful, the perfect union of twin flames, who recognized in each other not merely passion or purpose, but the sacred sanctuary of unconditional love that both had sought their entire lives.